Welcome back to Next Gen Investing. Let's bring in our next guest. That's Seth Schnackner, Managing Director at Strat America, is here to discuss the fallout from this TikTok ruling and the potential ban that we are going to see here now going forward. Now, Seth, I saw some of your notes that you had sent from yesterday. So this was before this ruling came out. Based on what I've seen from you, I don't think you were surprised by this, but what are your initial kind of thoughts and takeaways from what we now know?
That's right, Alex. I think, this has sort of been, I wouldn't say playing to plan, but this has sort of been on a trajectory that, has been kind of steady. I expected the Supreme Court to rule the way that they did, just given what the arguments sounded like. They were very, very skeptical. The case has never really been about free speech. It was kind of a weak argument to begin with. It's very much about national security. And I think the real question, and I do think it's a short-term question, is what's going to happen kind of in the interval between Mr. Biden leaving office, Mr. Trump taking office, and the law that kicks in. And I think the real concern is in part about going dark and shutting off a platform or deplatforming something that means a lot to American users and also people who earn their living from it. But there's also a lot of service providers around it, Apple and Google and Oracle and lots of third parties. So I think the real short-term shuffle in terms of how the transition happens between the two presidents and what happens to this law and the platform has been probably the only thing that has been curious about it. But based on what I'm sensing and what's been sort of said publicly, and I don't have any inside information, but it feels like it's going to kind of slide through the next few days, meaning whether it shuts off for a day or not, something will be figured out in the new administration that is probably a sale of the enterprise, and it won't go away. It'll get saved.
Yeah, so we try our best to, stay out of the politics of things and be apolitical on Schwab Network. Oftentimes those kind of views and things can, bias things, and we just try not to get involved in that. But,
sure.
Just from a, general bystander watching this, this seems a bit like a political hot potato, something that, maybe however long ago, maybe it was like a year at this point that this law was passed. It seemed like a long ways away, and maybe for some a short-term win on this, hard on China. But to your point, there's so many, particularly from a younger demographic, which we know is sort of up for grabs politically, that are going to be upset about this. And so, Biden's able to kind of wipe his hands and say, or that whole team, and say, hey, this is the Trump administration's issue now. But when you look at this and where it goes from here, it does seem to be quite uncertain. I mean, this is now law. It's being upheld. There is some things that are going to have to be figured out. You mentioned potential sale. They haven't been super open to that, but maybe they're going to have to.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I'd ever really wanted to see the political aspects of it either. I'm a digital business person, and, I've come out of even the earliest days of it, going all the way back to AOL. And I see things with TikTok and other apps that, kind of can wash in and out, with the tides, if you will. Kids can move on to other apps eventually, if you will, whatever happens in the next few weeks, basically. I mean, the hot potato stuff has been hard to ignore politically because the positions have been so inversely, one day someone supports it, the next day someone put it out. So it's very hard to ignore that. But, I think it's a huge business story. I really do. I mean, TikTok is a global juggernaut, not just from a user perspective, but from an advertising perspective. There are some who, think it'll eventually be like an Amazon fused with the social network. There's a big shopping initiative, something called influencer economy. This is music where I came from. It's an incredibly central driver and platform to all these different businesses. So, I think that's the real thing that I look at, that what happens if it is some way, degraded, if you will. But I tend to think it won't be. I think the real question will be, my view, and again, I don't have any inside information, it will be plunked apart and a U.S. buyer will emerge. And there's 3 or 4 buyers that have been out there. And the real question will be, not so much about who owns it, because I believe it'll go into an American-owned enterprise, and we will have some degree of editorial control over it. I think what the user experience will be after that happens, how easy it is for engineers to actually do this, and I don't think it'll be that easy. And do they label a post as coming from TikTok US? TikTok's got people in Miami that are very much in the USA, but that work in Latin markets. There's a lot of questions around a big enterprise, and it's a very big business, organizational, and strategy story more than it is a political story to me. But I bet it'll survive.
Yeah, no, I mean, if I sum up what you said, I mean, it looks like there's a desire to find an off-ramp, but that off-ramp is easier said than done in terms of potentially watching this change hands and ownership. You know, for the sake of conversation, though, and kind of playing this out in fallouts, I mean, obviously this is a, trading and investing network, and people are always looking for opportunities in markets. You've been a digital business executive, like you said, for a long time. TikTok revolutionized things in a way. I've never been on it, but my understanding is what it really did well versus some of these other platforms is it wasn't so favorable to those who already had a platform. It allowed somebody new to create something and be found from obscurity, not the same way in Instagram or an X or ever. They favor excitement already there. What is that? How does this transition? Let's say it goes away. I mean, you don't necessarily see that, but let's say it does. It's hard to say that another app really does what TikTok did. They found their own niche.
Well, it's an interesting question. You make a great point. I mean, user-generated content, giving voice to ones that don't have voices, homespun stuff, homegrown entertainment. I think a lot of digital platforms have aspired to that over the years. MySpace, Vine. I came from a place called AOL years ago, and a lot of these principles always existed. But I think they have a an algorithmic engine for video that recommends things to people, and it's quite advanced. It sucks up a lot of user data, and it hooks people. And I think to some degree that's probably been the magic sauce. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of individuals have adopted it, and it's a big part of their life. Some of them make money on it. I mean, look, Reels is out there from Instagram, and I think they're doing their part to kind of make longer reels available to users and make influencers, the road for influencers transition easier. Snap, people don't talk about, is still out there. YouTube is, to me, the originator of what you just talked about, actually, the original. So there's competitors out there, but I don't think this will get completely destroyed. I really don't. But I think there will be a protracted fight with China, who doesn't want to export the algorithm and doesn't want to be spoken to, for sure. So it's going to be a weird and tough road ahead.
Hey, final thought here, because I want to also look at, clearly your base case does not involve TikTok going away. It might look different. It might have different ownership. It might take a little bit. It might be messy. But in the event that there is a hiccup, if it does go away, I think there's also this kind of maybe misunderstanding that you might have some light you can shed, that this is going to be beneficial for all social media and digital advertising companies. I've always looked at this space as more winner take all than it gets credit to be. If you've got a limited marketing budget, why wouldn't you spend it where the eyeballs go? Just because TikTok might go away doesn't mean Snap is all of a sudden going to be this big thing. Instagram Reels, that makes sense. YouTube Shorts, I can make the argument. What are your thoughts on maybe some of the fallout and for some of these other companies?
Well, look, if it goes away, or if this disruption is longer than, like a day or a week or whatever it is, then yeah, I think they're going to for sure suffer on the advertising side. I was a little shocked at what I've been reading, in terms of their lack of preparation for this to happen. But, the digital advertising ecosystem, Google, Meta, Facebook, people don't talk about Microsoft, but Amazon, they're big incumbent players in it. And then, tons of other media enterprises that are always trying to pool up for premium performance advertising. So I don't think that there's a winner take all aspect to it. I think some of the advertising will get shared or just, redistributed as well. But TikTok is such a big thing. When I've met them and seen things like the Cannes Lions show, the amount of stuff that they have in terms of their brand and agency relationships, and a lot of committed people in that organization. I have a lot of friends there, and this is a good organization, hardworking people that I think are trying to revolutionize a shopping platform along with advertising and social media. So I don't think it's a zero-sum game. I think some of the spoils will be shared, but again, be repetitive. I think that they'll be around in some form. It just might look a little bit different in terms of the ownership.
Well, I'm sure many will be very happy to hear that if that is ultimately what happens. It's such a loyal community to that particular platform, and it's done what you've said. It's revolutionized so much of this space. So excited to see ultimately what happens and what that fallout looks like. Appreciate you taking your Friday afternoon and joining us here. Seth Schachner, Managing Director at Strat Americas, with some insight on the latest regarding TikTok and the Supreme Court's ruling to uphold that law that might require some sort of a ban here.